Chapter 45, He Risks It All. Pain is an excellent teacher. It strips away the abstract and forces you to focus on the immediate, the rhythmic throb in my shoulder, the sterile scent of the Herslinden recovery wing, and the terrifyingly fragile weight of the woman sleeping in the chair beside my bed. I watched Maya in the dim pre-dawn light. She looked exhausted, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, the vigil of justice, notebook clutched to her chest even in sleep. She had saved me on that mountain. She had turned the technology I once used as a cage into a beacon that brought an army to my rescue. But the fallout wasn't over. I looked at the encrypted phone on my bedside table. A message had come through an hour ago from Marcus. "The Swiss authorities are folding, sir. Sato Global's legal team has invoked the 1996 Icarus Treaty. They are claiming that because the science was developed with sovereign funds, it is property of the Tokyo Defense Ministry. They've filed an international injunction to seize the public servers and all biological assets, including Maya, for debriefing in a non-extradition zone." My heart hammered a frantic, irregular beat against my ribs. Non-extradition. That was code for a black site. They weren't going to sue her, they were going to disappear her. I looked at my bandaged shoulder. I could barely lift my arm, but my mind was firing with the cold, lethal clarity of the man who once owned the room. I had given her the company. I had given her the patents. But I had forgotten that in this world, there is no such thing as free. There is only unprotected. To save her, I had to do the one thing I had promised never to do again. I had to become the monster. I sat up, the movement sending a white-hot spike of agony through my chest. I suppressed a groan, my eyes fixed on Maya. She didn't stir. I carefully swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet hitting the cold floor. I reached for the phone and typed a single command to Marcus. "Fuel the backup jet at the private airfield, not the one the authorities are watching, the one in the valley. And get me the bypass codes for the Swiss National Data Center." "Sir," Marcus replied instantly, "if you hit the National Data Center, you're attacking a sovereign state's infrastructure. You'll never be able to set foot in Europe again. You'll be a fugitive." "I'm already a ghost, Marcus. Just get me the codes." I stood up, the room spinning. I grabbed my shirt from the chair, the one stained with blood and snow, and pulled it on, biting my lip to keep from screaming as I forced my injured arm through the sleeve. I looked at Maya one last time. I wanted to wake her. I wanted to kiss her and tell her that I was doing this so she could finally, truly be safe. But I knew if I did, she would stop me. She would refuse the sacrifice. "I love you," I whispered to the silence. "And that's why I have to lose you." I slipped out of the room, a shadow in the hallway, heading toward the final reckoning. Maya POV. I woke up to the sound of a heart monitor flatlining. I lunged for Alexander's bed, my heart in my throat, only to find it empty. The monitor was still on, but the sensors had been unclipped and left on the white sheets. They were still warm. "Alexander." I called out, my voice trembling. The room was silent. I looked at the nightstand. His phone was gone. My notebook was still in my lap, but when I opened it, I saw a new entry on the last page. "The room is too small, Maya. I'm going to make sure the world is big enough for both of us. Don't follow me, just keep the lights on. A." A wave of cold dread washed over me. I knew that tone. It was the steward again. But this wasn't about control, it was about sacrifice. I grabbed my coat and ran into the hallway. I found Marcus standing by the elevator, his face a mask of misery. "Where is he, Marcus?" I demanded. "He's doing what he thinks is right, Maya," Marcus said, refusing to meet my eyes. "I don't care what he thinks. Sato is moving. The UN is breathing down our necks. If he's out there alone, he's a target." He's not a target, Marcus whispered. He's the distraction. He's heading to the Swiss National Data Center. He's going to upload a logic bomb into the Icarus archives. It will permanently delete the 1996 treaty records and the weaponized versions of the code. But to do it, he has to be physically present at the terminal. And he has to use his own biometric signature as the trigger. I felt the air leave my lungs. If he uses his signature to commit a cyber attack on a national level, he'll be branded an international terrorist. He knows, Marcus said. He's trading his freedom for your safety. If the treaty records are gone, Sato has no legal claim to you or the science. You'll be the whistleblower who saved the world. He'll be the villain who burned the archives. No, I said, my voice hardening into a blade. I told him, no more martyrs. If he's going to burn the world, he's doing it with me. Maya, he's already halfway there. Then get the car, Marcus. Now, or I swear I'll buy this hospital and have you fired before we reach the lobby. Alexander POV. The Swiss National Data Center was a subterranean fortress buried deep beneath a mountain of granite outside of Bern. It was the brain of the country, a labyrinth of servers and cooling pipes that housed the secrets of banks, governments, and the Blackwood Sterling legacy. I stood at the primary security gate, my arm tied in a makeshift sling using my tie. I looked like a wreck, but the guards didn't see a man. They saw the biometric key they had been instructed to prioritize. Mr. Blackwood, the lead guard said, his tone respectful but cautious. We were told you were in recovery. The recovery is finished, I said, my voice a cold, authoritative rasp. I need access to the Icarus vault, internal audit. Authorized by the Sterling Blackwood majority. The guard checked his screen. Maya's upload had made her the majority, but I still held the Blackwood override. A legacy protocol my father had built into the Swiss grid 30 years ago. It was the ultimate locked-in feature. The gates groaned open. I walked into the heart of the mountain. The air was freezing, vibrating with the hum of 10,000 servers. It felt like walking into the digital afterlife we had found on Iger's shadow. I reached the central terminal. This was the spot. If I initiated the purge from here, the Icarus brand would be deleted from every server in the European Union. Sato would lose their leverage. The world would lose the weapon. I placed my hand on the scanner. Identity confirmed, Alexander Blackwood. Authority, sovereign. Warning, initiating data purge will trigger national security protocols. Are you sure? I looked at the yes button. My finger hovered over the glass. I knew what would happen the moment I pressed it. The alarms would sound. The Interpol red notice would be issued within seconds. I would never be able to return to New York. I would never be able to marry Maya in the Hamptons. I would be a man without a country, a man without a name. I thought about our night on the jet. I thought about the way she looked when she realized her father was awake. It was a small price to pay for her to be free. Alexander, stop. I turned. Maya was sprinting down the catwalk, her face pale, her eyes wild with fury and love. Marcus was behind her, looking like he'd been dragged through a hedge. Maya, get out of here. I shouted, my voice echoing through the server hall. The moment I hit this, the lockdown starts. I don't care about the lockdown. She reached the terminal, breathless, and grabbed my good arm. You think you're being a hero. You're being a coward. You're running away into a prison of your own making because you're too afraid to let me help you fight the legal battle. There is no legal battle for this, Maya. This is the Icarus Protocol. It's a death sentence. Then we serve it together. She stepped in front of the screen, her body a shield between me and the yes button. You told me we were partners. You told me the lines were drawn. If you do this alone, you're just proving that you still think I'm an asset to be managed. I'm trying to save your life. My life is you, Alexander. She screamed, the sound bouncing off the cold granite walls. If you turn yourself into a ghost, I'm already dead. Don't you get it? I don't want the company. I don't want the legacy. I just want the man who stood in the rain. I looked into her eyes, and for a second, the steward faltered. The logic of the sacrifice began to crumble under the weight of her defiance. They're coming for you, Maya, I whispered, my voice breaking. Sato, they'll never stop. Then we make them stop, together. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers interlacing with mine. We don't burn the archives, we expose them. We take the Icarus Protocol and we show the world that it was a crime committed by our parents. We don't hide the weapon, we dismantle it in public. The board will destroy us, I said. Let them try. We're the ones who wrote the code, remember. She smiled, a slow, lethal, and beautiful smile. And I think it's time we showed them what a real, locked-in contract looks like. Maya POV. The tension in the data center was a physical weight. Alexander was shaking, his face a map of pain and indecision. He wanted to save me, but he was realizing that his way, the Blackwood way, was a dead end. Maya, the police are at the gates, Marcus whispered, checking his phone. The Swiss authorities have detected the override. We have 5 minutes before this room is swarmed. Good, I said. I turned to the terminal. I didn't hit the purge button. Instead, I opened a high-gain transmission line to every major news outlet in the world. What are you doing? Alexander asked. I'm doing a live demo, I said, my fingers flying across the keys, of the Sovereign Protocol. I pulled up the weaponized files, the ones Arthur Blackwood and my father had hidden. I projected them onto the central monitor, then mirrored the feed to the global press. Look at the screen, Alexander, I said. This is the truth. It's not just a map. It's a record of 30 years of corporate and military collusion. It shows every payment, every signature, every life they experimented on. As the data began to stream to the world, the sirens outside the data center began to wail. Alexander looked at the screen, then at me. A slow, dawning realization crossed his face. I wasn't just saving him from becoming a terrorist. I was making it impossible for anyone to hide ever again. By making the secret public, I had removed the motive for Sato to kidnap me. The asset was now common knowledge. The risk is still there, Maya, Alexander said, pulling me into his arms. We're still going to lose everything. We've already lost everything, Alexander, I whispered, burying my face in his neck. Except each other, and that's the only thing I'm not willing to trade. The doors to the server hall burst open. Swiss tactical police swarmed the catwalks, their weapons leveled at us. Hands in the air, the lead officer shouted. Alexander didn't move. He kept his arms wrapped around me, his chin resting on the top of my head. He looked at the officer, his eyes clear and calm. My name is Alexander Blackwood, he said, his voice ringing through the hall. And I am here to report a 30-year-old crime. My partner, Maya Sterling, has the evidence. I suggest you start recording. Alexander POV. The fallout had finally reached the bottom. We were led out of the data center in handcuffs, not as criminals, but as persons of interest in the largest whistleblower case in European history. The press was there, a wall of cameras that made the Zurich summit look like a small gathering. As we walked through the lobby of the Bern police station, I looked at Maya. She was walking beside me, her head held high, her eyes burning with a fire that no cell could ever contain. She looked magnificent. We were separated for questioning. I spent 12 hours in a room with 3 federal prosecutors and a man from the UN. I told them everything. I gave them the names, the bank accounts, the codes. I didn't hide behind a lawyer. I didn't ask for a deal. I was done with deals. Around midnight, the door to the interrogation room opened. It wasn't the prosecutor. It was Maya. She wasn't in handcuffs anymore. She was holding a stack of legal documents and a cup of coffee. "The UN has granted us temporary immunity, Alexander," she said, her voice a low, warm melody. "They've realized that Sado Global was the real threat. The Icarus Protocol is being dismantled by an international commission. And your mother? Well, she's decided to retire to a very secure facility in France." I leaned back in the plastic chair, a long, ragged breath escaping me. "And you?" "The Sterling Trust is being restructured as a global health initiative. We're working with the WHO to distribute the mapping technology for free." She walked over and sat on the table in front of me, her eyes searching mine. "The room is finally empty, Alexander. There's nothing left to own." "Good," I said, reaching out with my bound hands to touch her knee. "I never liked the furniture anyway." She laughed, a rich, soulful sound that filled the sterile room. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver key. "The guards gave me this," she said, clicking the handcuffs open. My hands fell to my sides, the weight of the steward finally, truly vanishing. I stood up and pulled her into my arms, the physical pain in my shoulder forgotten in the sheer, overwhelming relief of our survival. "You risked it all, Maya," I whispered. "We risked it all," she corrected. "And we won." Maya POV. We walked out of the police station and into the cold Swiss night. The city of Bern was quiet, the moon reflecting off the river. There were no cameras this time, no motorcades, no vigil of justice statues. We walked to a small, nondescript hotel near the station and checked in under our own names. No aliases. No secrets. In the room, Alexander finally let the exhaustion take him. He slumped onto the bed, his eyes closing before his head hit the pillow. I sat beside him, watching him breathe. I looked at the ring on my finger. It was just a band of gold. It didn't represent a contract or a debt. It represented the man who was brave enough to be broken so I could be whole. The fallout was over. Act III was complete. We had survived the fire, the theft, the secrets, and the sacrifice. We had dismantled the empire and found the truth. But as the first light of dawn began to touch the mountains, I realized that we were standing on the edge of a new world. Act IV was the claim, the part where we stopped fighting for our lives and started living them. I lay down beside Alexander, pulling the covers over us. "Act IV, Alexander," I whispered into his ear. He stirred, a slow, sleepy smile touching his lips. "The claim." "The claim," I agreed. "And this time, the only thing we're claiming is each other." "Deal," he murmured, pulling me closer. The room was quiet. The world was at peace. And for the first time in our lives, we were exactly where we were meant to be, locked in. But the door was wide open. Next chapter, Chapter 46, Rebuilding Trust.